Don't mind me just putting this out in here. Welcome to this first episode of the Frequently Asked Questions series. This is a question that I get a lot. Steve, what is your teaching method? At first, this kind of caught me off guard. I did have an answer because I did prepare it before, actually launching myself into giving classes. Um, and maybe this catches a lot of people off guard, a lot of teachers and especially language teachers, like, what's your teaching method? And you're like, well, my teaching method is a book. Which is not a bad answer in itself, right? But it has to sound commercial. It has to sound like you're really good, right? Like you're better than your competition. Am I right? By the way, I'm going to upload a video in the next few days, I hope, about 5 things about being a language teacher. Let's get to that. Let's get back to it. So, what is my teaching method? My teaching methods, well, there's a short answer to it and there's a long answer to it. My teaching method, I guess, a short answer would be it's a practical method with practice, and you're supposed to see improvements because you're practicing the language that I'm teaching you. There are many details, things I do, different activities that I may do with you in class. Maybe I will ask you to do something as homework. And I also give you some tips about all the things that you can do on your own to keep practicing, because I usually only see you like an hour, like an hour a week, which is really little. So, short answer, my method is having you practice the language, guided by me, aided by me. Now, a long answer, get ready for it. As I think about it, I'm not sure if there's a better way to explain my method than to tell you the story of how I have developed it. And it's not done yet. I don't think there will come a day when I say, okay, my method is good enough. Let's just leave it as this. I mean, it is good enough, but I think I always want to make it better. Also, this will help me get some mental clarity on what is my method, because I know this, I intuitively do it, and I have some documents, things I use for reference as to how I'm going to teach someone of a certain level. I have a work on this, but at the same time, I put a lot of intuition and heart into it, and I do it class by class, person by person. So I guess for me, I'm going to tell you the story of when I was around 4 years old. And I first started to learn English. And I first started to discover my passion for teaching, I guess. So let's start with teaching. I remember this when I was in kindergarten. And my older brother was already in elementary or primary school, rather. That's what it is in Mexico. I'm actually still confused as to how schools work in the U.S., but whatever. So my older brother was in primary school, and he was learning sums. What do you call it? Adding in English? Sumas. Adding. Yeah, as you can see, I don't know everything about English. He was doing that, and also what do you call this? In Spanish, it is multiplicaciones. Is it in English? Is it multiplication? Multiplying? Stuff like that. 2 times 2 equals 4, 2 times 3 equals 6, blah, blah, blah. So he was saying all that sort of stuff. And I was grabbing it because, I was a kid absorbing everything, and I saw him do that, and he was practicing, what's 4 plus 4? 8. 4 plus 5 is 9, or whatever. I don't remember exactly. But I got a grab into it. And so what I did is I memorized some of those things, like 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? So I knew the answer. And so one day I was in kindergarten. I think it was one of the last days I had in there. And a friend of mine, my best friend at the time, wow, it has been a long time. We're talking like 18 years ago. Jesus Christ, it's a long time. Yeah, no, ain't it? It was like, so maybe this video should be called the story of my life. It's gonna be a long video now. So, for whatever reason, this adding subject came up. Like, do you know how to do adding? Yeah, I know how to do it. Maybe it was something like that. And, or maybe I was just asking him. I can't vaguely remember this. I mean, I was 4 years old, but like, I was telling him, well, you know what 2 plus 2 is? No, what is it? It is 4. And so this came into me like, hey, I know the answer is 4, right? 2 plus 2 is 4. 1 plus 3 is 4, whatever. But why? Because these are just answers that I had memorized. And I guess my mind started to work on it. Maybe it was for a minute, or maybe it was a couple of days, thinking, how can I explain this to my friend? Actually, now that I think about it, no, I thought about it right on the spot. Yeah. So I did this. I realized there was a pattern as to why 2 plus 2 makes 4. Because if you have 2 of something and 2 of something, that's something like apples or whatever, you will have 4, right? I have 2 here, I have 2 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very basic, right? But not so much for a 4-year-old kid. And a lot of kids do that. And now that I'm older and I see my little cousins, whatnot, and I have the chance to teach them, I also have taught them with the same method, like, hey, so that you understand what adding is, just use your hands at first, but then go into memorizing, because that's a lot better. And yeah, so back to my friend in kindergarten. I was explaining to him, like, 2 plus 2 it means you have 2, and then you add another 2, right? And you know how to count, right? Yeah, I know how to count. Maybe he knew how to count until 10, whatever. Maybe me as well. So you have 2 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So 2 plus 2 equals 4. Oh, and he, like, I think he had like an epiphany when I told him this, right? And so that's something I have done my entire life. It's one of my first memories. Is I understand something and somebody else doesn't, and I break it down into little tiny baby steps, so that it's easy and understandable. I do believe people have different gifts. I believe I have a gift for teaching and a passion for teaching. And nowadays people tell me that I explain things so well. This will not always be the case, right? Like, maybe one day I will explain something and somebody will still have doubts after that. That's okay. But as a language teacher, this is part of what I do. Like the other day, this wasn't a student, but this was a woman from China. She was about 31 years old, I think. And she was asking, because in Chinese you don't conjugate verbs, so that you just have the verb in its normal original way, and you say the subject plus the verb. So I explained to her, well, you see, in Spanish, she didn't understand why did verbs need to change, like conjugation, basically. But she would call it, why did verbs need to change? I don't understand. And I told her, well, So you have the normal infinitive, or the original form of verb, like for example, I don't know, riding. Actually, the example I gave her is eating, but let's take writing. So in Spanish, that is escribir. So escribir is the infinitive form. When we change it, for example, yo escribo, I can say yo escribo, which means I write, but I can also just say escribo, which is write, but it's conjugated. And this means I'm explaining to you sort of differently what I explained to her. What this means is those last letters that we change at the end of the verb mean number one, who's doing it, who's doing the action, who's performing the action, and number two, when is it happening? So yo escribo, I can also just say escribo. It means me in the present, I write. So conjugations are often very specific in Spanish, so we don't need to say the subject pronoun. Yo escribí, I wrote in the past, but I can also just say escribí, and it also means I wrote. And so on. And so she actually kind of started to get it. Oh, yeah, she didn't perfectly understand my Spanish. She's still learning, but she has very good Spanish for a learner. And but she says, yeah, I don't understand everything you said, but I think you gave a good explanation. That's kind of it. So my teaching methods, as much as I can put it in paper and describe it on words or whatever, it's just me doing that, taking complex concepts and breaking them down into little pieces because I love learning. I love knowledge or certain knowledges about certain things. And I love to see that growth in other people. I love to teach people. Kind of a developer. I really, it's kind of an intrinsic, is that how you say it in English? Whatever. Intrinsic life mission for me. Like, I want to make other people get better. I want to improve their lives. I want them to see that they can do it. That they think they kind of do it, but it's all in their minds. And I read about this once in a book. The story about this woman that I think she was a nurse or something, and there was this woman who was like in some sort of paralysis or something. She was in the hospital. She could barely move. And the nurse was with this woman who was getting treatment in the hospital, and the woman was very sad because she couldn't do anything. And they were having this conversation where the woman says to the nurse, the patient says to the nurse, I barely have the strength to wash a plate. And the nurse replies to her, that is today. Tomorrow you will be able to wash 2 plates. So even from that place, right, where she can barely move, when she's kind of paralytic, this really advocates a lot of the passion I have in me. And from there, you know that people can grow, that they can do more, and so by the end of the story, the woman that was the patient, she was doing some sort of crafts, and she was selling them as well. And the nurse was a developer. Yeah, that's what these sort of people are called in this book, developers. I think it's something about how to find your strengths, something like that. So that's teaching. What about languages? Well, let's go back to when I was 4 years old, and I even told Steve, I wish I could put you in like ×2 speed. Which you can do in YouTube, by the way. I wish I could put you in ×2 speed, like on Telegram or WhatsApp. because you speak so slowly, because you don't go to the point. And probably I cannot help it. Number one, because I ADHD, and number two, because I'm really passionate about what I'm doing right now. So, let me do a quick pause. I needed to check on my battery, but also like a motorcycle just like right next to my house, so it was good that I paused right then. So back to 4 years old, I'm in an English class in kindergarten, the St. Kurt kindergarten, and I saw a drawing of a carrot, and it said carrot, and I copied that drawing in my notebook because I was a little kid, and we were told to do so. So I learned a word in English, carrot. And even if you live in the US, you might hear some words from English like okay, hello, how are you? A little bit of basic stuff, right? And I was really trying to nail the pattern for English, kind of like what I did with adding. Like, oh yeah, it must be because of this. Like I click, oh, the pattern is this. Because if you have one of something and one of something, 1 plus 1 is 2. Oh yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, the pattern checks out for all the additions. Yeah, for all operations. In English, I couldn't nail the pattern. So I took what I knew, and I think many of us do something like this one way or another when we were learning languages. I took what I knew from Spanish, and I thought, well, hello is hola. It kind of resembles. They kind of resemble one another as I was becoming like 5, 6 years old. I wonder if there's a pattern there. But that how are you? It has nothing to do with como estás in Spanish. So what is the pattern? And I guess this happens a lot with adults and all sorts of people. Folks, there is no pattern. Okay, English is a Frankenstein. It comes from French, from German, from Dutch, I think, from Latin. And, well, yeah, I mean, it has some words that it has invented, I guess, like, okay. But it's mostly a mix of other languages. There kind of is a pattern, like if you know French or you know German. But other than that, it's not really predictable. So that's English. That's our beloved English. It's funny because we still call French the black sheep of Romance languages. I guess that's because we're not really calling English a Romance language. Yeah. As I grew older, I continued on school and I started to learn something for the very first time. Something that I would learn as if it was the first time for the next 8 years or so. I don't know. It was verb to be. Yeah, verb to be. And we learned that in many schools. Verb to be. I am, you are, he is, we are, blah, blah, blah. And how it is used as an auxiliary verb, and all the structures or basic structures of verb to be. Because actually, giving all possible structures of using verb to be would be ridiculous, right? Anyways, that did help me, I guess. Some years they would explain some technical stuff that they didn't explain in other years, and they helped me out even nowadays. But they were such little bits of info when I wanted to see the entire language. But I was a kid and I was absorbing stuff. I learned the alphabet. I learned some words because we do see like vocabulary lists in school, and that is useful, but it's again just little bits of info. You never actually come out of school speaking English. It's very rare that happens. Thanks to that, I have a job as a language teacher. So again, my older brother would watch videos on YouTube. There was this series, this guy that was really creative then. By this point, I'm 7, 8 years old. It was called RV and the Chief, right? Based off the Halo characters, right? The Arbiter and the Chief, Master Chief. So there were these little action figures, right? The little Master Chief action figure and the little Arbiter action figure, but they were alive, right? that was it. It was not quite a show for kids, but it was also kind of in English. You had to watch it with subtitles. And I know I have said a lot of bad stuff about subtitles, yeah. And I'm actually rethinking that because, as I said in my introduction video for this channel, we're here to debate new ideas, not to say I'm always right. But yeah, back in the day, I would learn one or two words with the subtitles because the Master Chief action figure, maybe, or someone else would say, "Cry," and I listened to this cry, and the subtitles said "llorar." So cry, I knew what crying was, right? Crying. So when I one day went to, maybe a couple months later, I went to school, and we were looking at emotions, I guess, or actions, whatever. It was like smiling, and the activity that was that the teacher, she would tell us something like smile, and we would all have to do it. Like what do we think it is? We have to do it. And it was like smile, so we all did this. We didn't say anything, we just smiled, meaning that we understand the word smile. Or like getting angry or something. I don't quite remember. And we will all get angry. And we will look to one another if we weren't sure what the emotion was. And there was this one that caught everyone off guard except for me. Cry. Everyone was in shock. Wait, we haven't seen this one yet, and we hadn't. And so I got this, and I started. Meh. And so everybody copied me. So I didn't quite learn English in school, but I kind of learned on my own. I did learn English in school, but it was little pieces of information when the language is huge in comparison. Yeah, fast forward a few years, I would watch a lot of sitcoms with subtitles again in Spanish. Had the subtitles a bit in English, or no subtitles at all. I'm pretty sure I would already speak English by then, but they were in Spanish, and but I still learned some things, even with the subtitles in Spanish, right? I learned the word so. I kind of learned some basic structures, some things that they were saying, and little by little, I actually was, maybe consciously or not, just getting into the language. I will watch Friends, your number one series for learning another language. I would watch 2.5 Men, which is not quite for kids, huh? Neither Friends. But yeah, I would watch that sort of stuff. By the time I was in middle school, I somehow spoke a little bit of English. And I wasn't quite sure how. But I did. From all the previous years of learning and from all the sitcoms and blah, blah, blah. So I would get into school. We were all ready to learn verb to be once again. It was kind of a meme by this point, folks. Yeah, verb to be. Yeah, we all know it. and so the teacher, for whatever reason, asked me something. By this time, I'm like 11 years old. Why I didn't speak or something like that. And I told her that I was kind of sick. In English, I'm a little bit sick. I said something like that. Oh, and she was kind of impressed because I spoke some English. This is what happens, right? Like, it shouldn't be like that. Like the English teacher is surprised that you speak some English in the English class when you have had English classes for the past 6-7 years at least. But yeah, it shouldn't take that long, even for the for some slow learners out there, it really shouldn't take that long. So yeah, I and exams in middle school, secondary school, that's what we call it, were really easy for me. Activities were easy. I would learn a new word once in a while, but I wasn't really learning much, and I got frustrated by this. Who doesn't? I really wanted to learn. And my other friends that maybe probably were not watching RB and the Chief or sitcoms, hadn't watched any of that stuff. They probably wouldn't have the same level as me. So we were taught a lot of grammar. We were taught verbs to be year after year after year, and exams were really easy for me because I spoke some English. By the time I was around 13 to 14 years old, I was following this podcast in English, which I didn't fully understand, but maybe I could understand 60 to 70% of it. So this was a Christian podcast, and I got really into it. I for those of you who do not know this, I am a Christian, and it's really hard to find another Christian that shares at least some of the main ideas that you have. It shouldn't be like that either, but whatever. So these guys, they understood what it was about, and I really liked their teachings, and I learned a lot from them, including English, because even though they're not native speakers, they spoke English with accents and whatnot. But I would learn from them. I would hear to their podcast, and I wrote them a message because they were offering this free Bible course through email, and I asked for it, and I got it, and they didn't know me, and then they asked me if I wanted to tell them anything about me, and I said, well, yeah, I don't know, I live in Mexico, I'm 13 years old. Oh, they asked me, well, we have been looking for some translators. Would you be interested in translating from English into Spanish? I said yes. And during this time, this conversation, like maybe it was spaced out, like some days between one answer and the other. I was continuing to hear to their podcast, to listen to it, and something like just fell into place. Something just clicked. The puzzle became a lot smoother. All those rough corners that didn't quite fit were adjusted into the right place. And I was understanding like about everything in that podcast, and I was like, whoa, I've never had this with English before. and I told them, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting an anointing for this job, because I'm suddenly understanding your messages a lot more. Now, I think that is true, and at the same time, not quite. It wasn't like, firm, you suddenly understand English. It was, but I think it was kind of a miracle because it was the right time and place. From all the build-up of the previous years, from school, from sitcoms, from RB and the Chief, and whatever not. All that build up, and now I could understand English, and I was fascinated by it, to say the least. I with ADHD, and I see it now. I didn't know this back then. It was really overwhelming for me. I wasn't really given any like instructions on how to do this, and I volunteered for this. Okay, folks, don't say like they're, I don't know, asking a little kid to do this. They knew this, and they weren't even remotely mad at me or anything like that. They were thankful, if anything, that I offered myself, and I never actually finished their job. That translation was like one of my first experiences on translation. It was quite hard. It was quite hard. I figured I had to write a script on Word Office, and and then record myself saying it, but I couldn't quite get it right, didn't have a good microphone, blah 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 blah, whatever. So I kept listening to them, and now, well, now I can understand English. And I have noticed that in the internet, there's a lot of more info that may not be available in Spanish. So let's take a deep dive into internet. And mostly YouTube. You know, I would watch a lot of YouTube when I was 13, 14 years old. A lot of video game content. And so I started to look for these video gamers, right? Minecraft, balloons, I don't know, whatever else. And so I was starting to have all this input from native speakers, like a crazy amounts of input. This video is definitely going to be called like my story or whatever with English. How are you learning? And so from hearing from these native speakers, I improved a whole lot. My accent, I was struggling a lot with English. I still struggled once in a while. But it was really hard for me. I didn't really knew how to make the sounds, how to do the R, right? It was hard for me. And now I have a neutral American accent. And of course I still have traces of my original Mexican accent. And by this time also, Miss Holly, aka Super Holly, she has an amazing YouTube channel. She speaks a lot about English and Spanish. She also was creating this amazing content explaining differences between vowel sounds, between consonant sounds, which I wasn't conscious about. Like, yeah, they sound kind of different, don't they? The consonant sounds. So our T's are, for example, is not the same. In Spanish, it's te. You kind of put your tongue between your teeth or next to your teeth, whatever. And in English, you put it kind of in the palate, just a little bit before your teeth, something like t. It's kind of a softer T, therefore. And maybe I haven't quite nailed it. It isn't quite perfect already, even nowadays. But she also really helped me. So she was my teacher for pronunciation things, and she helped me understand. She helped me to see English with a different perspective, Miss Holly. ¿Qué onda, Holly, por si algún día ves este video? Gracias por tus videos. Excelentes clases, Miss Holly. And yeah, there are a lot of teachers out there that may not classify themselves as such, but they are amazing teachers. That's kind of my story with English. I have had a ton of input. I have heard a ton of hours have listened to native speakers. So it is. I feel like it is really no wonder that my accent is like this. With that and the tips, some of which I gave in one of my past videos, three things you can do to improve your accent. Let me just check if I still have enough battery. 11%, we're fine. And now, here you have me. I took the grammar I learned in school. I took the bits of English I learned from sitcoms. I took the English I learned from the Christian podcast. I took the advices from Miss Holly. I have taken all of what I can get. And I have also seen, there's also a teacher called Jessica Daniel. She's an amazing teacher, like an amazing English teacher. She's a native speaker. I think she only speaks English. I once saw one of her classes. Her classes, she didn't have any books. She didn't have any fill the blank activities. She was just talking to you, correcting your mistakes. and having a conversation with you about a different topic every time, because she doesn't want you to speak about the same thing once and over again, because what good would that be? So I took things from teachers, things from polyglots, and I'm still learning, and I'm super passionate about it. I'm still learning a lot. And by the way, going back a little bit as well to, this is actually kind of important also to my teaching method, which allegedly is the main topic of this video. Going back to this Christian podcast, they uploaded to YouTube bits of their programs by subjects, and they also have a web page, but it took me some time to figure out their web page, anyways, which on which you could see like the entire archive and all that, but I didn't quite understand that. So one day they announced on YouTube that they were only going to be making videos on Italian, and in fact they hadn't made any videos in English for maybe a month or two, I don't know. And I don't know, I was shocked and I was kind of devastated, like, how am I gonna follow you now? Like my favorite podcast, no. Oh man, I haven't heard that podcast in a while. At least not regularly. I was sad for a few months about this. They just made this one video in English announcing, yeah, you have seen that we are now only uploading stuff in Italian. Sort with motorcycle, remember I live next to a highway. Not really. We put this video out because we feel like we should address the Italian-speaking public. I was like, bro, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I perfected my English here, and now you're going into Italian. I was sad for a few months about this. One day, I don't know why. I'm not sure why. But I started to hear their YouTube videos, which are, again, bits of their podcast. Even though they were in Italian, okay, I started to hear to them. I started to listen to them. And my father, like, he learned some Italian back in college, I think. So I knew, like, a few numbers in Italian because he taught me. That was about it. But you could also see, like, okay, some words are like in Spanish, many of them are not. Or you may not realize which Spanish word corresponds to these Italian words, etc. But you could read the titles, maybe get some idea of something, and I would listen to it, and I didn't understand basically anything. And I don't know why, I just kept listening. I just kept on listening, folks. Sometimes I will say something like, andiamo a leggere il profeta Isaia capitolo 4 versicolo 3. Oh, wait. So Profeta Isaia is almost exactly the same as Profeta Isaías in Spanish, is all, which is Prophet Isaiah in English. Capítulo 4 versículo 3. Oh, capítulo 4 versículo 3. Chapter 4 verse 3. So knowing numbers in Italian helped me out. This is also a little bit that I'm gonna take, like, let me pause this because I need to write this down. And so, hopefully I don't forget to mention this. So I knew the numbers, and because of this, I could go look for the Bible verse. And so I would look at the Bible verse in Spanish and in Italian, so I could have a comparison, and I would understand some things from the Italian. And I would learn 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 new words, which is amazing. And I started, after a couple weeks, to notice that I understood one word here, one word over there. In a month or so, it was quite evident to me that the puzzle was getting together, and I was understanding more and more and more. And the more I would listen, the more I would accelerate. It's kind of a bell curve, so I'm in the accelerating part of it. And I would understand more and more words every day. And I'm like, okay, so this means that, and that means that. And because I didn't know what I was doing, I would stop thinking like this means that in Spanish, I will just be like, oh yeah, this means this. And Italian on itself without the need of English or Spanish. Uh, and in about 3 months, of course, I had doubts. I still have things that I would like to improve on my Italian. I should get an Italian teacher that will just help me out with this a little bit. A native teacher, I guess, or someone who speaks like a native. And but the thing is, after some like 3 months, I was maybe 14, 15 years old by this point. I basically understood everything they were saying, and there are always new words, always, always. And Italian is kind of a hard language when you want to become like very, very advanced. It is kind of a hard language. If you're kind of casual, it is an okay, easy language, especially coming from Spanish. Um, so this opens a new world to me because it wasn't like, oh, I have been learning English for so many years. No, it was basically I learned Italian in 3 months. Was I Z2 in Italian in 3 months? Absolutely not. But I was able to understand everything and I was able to speak it. Perfectly, also not. Perfect pronunciation? No, not even nowadays. Um, but I was it, and so that really opened my mind. And going back to this a little bit, uh, I guess this was one of my first hints. Uh, well, at least with Italian, I guess there were lots of hints with English, but this was one of my first hints to realize that conscious learning complements unconscious learning. I have about 8% battery left, so let's try to speed this up. And I'm always trying to improve. A few months ago, when I was starting to be an English teacher, I offer English. I offered English and Italian lessons at first, mostly because I'm in Mexico and everybody already speaks Spanish. But I also offer Spanish classes for foreigners, which nobody has taken so far, but I would love to. So one kid that saw one of my signs asked me if I was the English teacher. I said yes. And he told me, well, I have an English exam to enter high school next week. I was like, sorry, did you say next week? Yeah, next week. I'm like, what kind of progress do you expect to make in 1 week? But then I thought, okay, I have my story with Italian, with English, and some things I know. Is it actually possible to learn in 1 week? And I said, okay, you know what, I'll take the challenge. Let's give it a shot. And I even worked more than I had to because I was really passionate about his story. I printed some material for him so that he could practice as much as possible his study. I gave him some sample exams. I told him, hey, I would normally recommend training your listening and speaking, but for you, train your reading, bro, and your writing, because that's what you're gonna get in for an exam in 1 week. And you're not gonna speak English in 1 week. I for sure told him that. Anyway, he only took one class, and he did good enough in his exam, by the way, that now he's failing English. But this raised a question in me: is it how much progress can you actually make in 1 week? Can you learn an entire language in 1 week? And so I did something which was a 7-day Russian challenge, which is why I started to learn Russian. And I picked Russian because I basically didn't know anything about it. I knew Privyet, which is hello in Russian, and not much more than that. Ruski, which means Russian in Russian. And so I went to do like a full week of just learning Russian, but I didn't have the free time. I was working as an English teacher and in other stuff as well. So I would take like, if Sunday is my free day, I will take Sunday, and whether that will be day 1. Next Sunday, if I'm free again, that will be day 2. Like that until I had completed 7 days. So yeah, I put a lot of hours into Russian. First things I did was I learned the alphabet as best as I could. and I did a lot of stuff, and I had help from people which I now realize acted as amazing teachers. That some people that helped me read in Russian, some people that corrected my mistakes when I was trying to write phrases in Russian, and I still don't speak a lot of Russian. Я не говорю по-русски. But but I learned a lot actually, and one of the things I realized, because again, thank you ADHD, it was actually a positive one. But about like day 4, I was so tired of reading things that I didn't understand, of trying to read texts, of trying to find people that could help me read the text and tell me how it was pronounced. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to what I know, and I'm going to listen to a video. And I had just watched a video about a guy who watched Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse 50 times to learn Spanish. So I said, I will do that. I like that. I watched this documentary about the Romans, who did the Romans lose to. That was what Google Translate said it meant. Who did the Romans lose to, and then the Red Room channel in Russian. And I would hear it, I would listen to it once and over and over and over again. And I was starting to get familiar with the sounds, even though I didn't understand the words. I recognized something happens. So we took the reading, all the reading that I did, to try to learn as much Russian as possible. And I learned a few words like Valshaya, which means big, as an adjective, yeah? It can change depending on many things, but one of the ways to say big is Valshaya. There's Valsham and some others, I don't know, whatever. I also learned Nie, which means no. And I also watched this video about words that were kind of the same in Spanish and Russian. One of them was problema, which means problem, or problema in Spanish. So I don't understand a thing about this documentary. But when he said, Nie большая problema, I understood it. In the middle of all the things I didn't understand. And that was I did that challenge to make conclusions. That day I made the conclusion, around that time, that conscious learning complements unconscious learning, that reading, writing, speaking, and listening all complement each other. And you're going to learn a lot faster if you train all 4 at the same time. And if you have to train just one, train listening. That's the boss of them all. So 6% battery. So let's go back to the original question. What is your teaching method? My teaching method, again, I'm not gonna give you like the 100-hour explanation, which would tell you to take all my classes. But I train your speaking, your listening, your reading, your writing, and I give you all the tips that I have gathered over the years from my own learning experience, and from the learning experience of other polyglots, and from the teaching methods of other teachers, the good ones and the not so good ones. I take all of that, I try to break it down in easy baby steps for you, right? And that is my teaching method. You're not gonna see me take out a book of grammar, because I'm tired of verbs to be being taught and nobody's actually learning English. Okay? So I take what I learned from learning French, from learning Portuguese, from learning Italian, from learning English, from learning Russian, and from learning Spanish even, and I give it to you, and I'm still constantly evolving. So what you will see in my classes is I will be like one of these kind people who help me with Russian. I will help you read the text. I will help you out with the words you don't know how to pronounce. I will help you out with the things you're not saying right. I will correct your mistakes because you learn from your mistakes. It is dark in here. I have been here for almost an hour. And it's going to be very practical. Hopefully, it will be some fun. I will teach you some grammar if I feel like it could be helpful for you. And I will make my course, especially for your case, my course, meaning the classes that I will give to you. If you have an exam in the next week and you speak like zero English, I will teach you one way. If you have 3 months to learn English, and I'm going to see you 5 hours today, a week, and you need to pass a job interview, and that's it, I'm going to teach you a different way. If you want to become advanced, different way. But I'm able to do this because I understand the concept in my mind, and I can break it down into little steps. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. I don't know the answer to every question. But, and I'm still improving. But, what's my teaching method? I'm going to teach you to speak the language the way that worked for me and for many other people. And you will go home with a reproducible class, meaning what the activity we did in class you can do on your own to keep progressing even faster if you want to do so. Thank you. I think this is going to be it. This video is going to be called something like Frequently Asked Questions, Episode 1. What is your teaching method? My story with English and languages. My story with languages and teaching. Something like that. Thank you all very much. I hope you liked this video, and thank you if you did stay all the way through the end. Maybe not a lot of people will, but I really have had a lot of fun making this video. Hope to make some shorter videos in the future. Make sure to like if you like the content and you want to see more. Subscribe. Any comments from with feedback, with some very cool tricks to learn. Tell us your story about how you learned the language that you wanted to learn. Okay, peace out everyone. Teacher Steve here. Until next one. Saichi and sayonara.